be see how we do it. So here's the drill. A lot of you know it. What we three have decided to do was much the same what we did in Boston last 3 weeks ago. And in Boston, we were at Andy Vogel's temple, and we did a priest, Hal Kirkham, and Andy Vogel, a rabbi, and me, an atheist, did talking. And what happened was, which is very nice, happened to have happened, was that the New York Times published an article, and the Huffington Post did too, about how so many millennials are turning away from the church. And so that was the charge. And the discussion was fantastic. It was really good. Like this audience, though, I'm going to forewarn you, because we're large, when we get to the discussion part, which is all yours, because you all came with questions, right, Pat? And when we turn it over to you, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand to be called on, so we don't get confusion. I hope that doesn't insult you. We're going to start with, I guess I'll start. Alex. Begin the evening with a gyrene, but here's an announcement for you. The Pentagon decided today, did you hear this? Yeah. Women are available, not available. Women are allowed, available. Women are allowed. No, 3 women graduated from Ranger School, and I think that was a little kick.
Yeah.
3, there was a third. Yeah, the captain, all West Pointers. And I remember in 1976 when the academies went co-ed, it was not a happy time for us guys. It was a difficult time because we just thought the brotherhood was pooched and everything was wrong about it. But now it's different. Take a look at what Peshmerga is doing, and take a look what the IDF is doing. And if you have a memory for it, some of you do, remember the Viet Cong. Those women could fight. And so, anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. Welcome aboard, ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Calfee, United States Marine Corps, Force Recon.
Alex Calfee, class of '92 here at Hawk Tech. So Pete wanted me to give a little spiel about kind of my background, how I ended up in the Marine Corps, how I ended up in the reconnaissance community, and kind of what came after. So I left Hawken in '92, as I said, graduated, went to a small school in Virginia called Hampton-Sydney College. Spent I don't know how to describe them, 3 years at Hampton-Sydney. Yeah, I know, my folks, I don't know, they might be watching. So so I spent 3 years there and found it unsatisfactory. Dropped out, and after a short stint out west, enlisted in the Marine Corps. Actually, it was the day before Thanksgiving, so it was the 23rd of November, 1995, I enlisted and had delayed entry to go to boot camp. Sam Weller was there to witness. He actually, classmate of mine who was at West Point, was a senior at West Point at the time. So off I went in early February of 1996. The typical parasailing experience, it was an interesting one. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it was a hilarious experience. So if you've ever seen Full Metal Jacket, that was, accepting the suicide at the end. It was very close to my experience at parasailing. So if you've seen the movie, that gives you a flavor. Went to the fleet. I actually got deployed to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And this was before it was cool, in 1996. Spent a year on the fence line down there, patrolling part of the private security company, Windward. Had a great time down there. Lots of good fishing, by the way. Down at Gibson. Lots of good fishing. Big tarpon, biggest tarpon I've ever caught down there. And from there, I went back to the fleet in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. in early 1997, mid 1997. Was unsatisfied with my fleet experience. I was in a tank battalion as an infantry guy, not great experience. So I decided to attempt to join the reconnaissance community. For those of you who don't know, reconnaissance mission is to basically act as battlefield intelligence for infantry units to help them understand what's going on beyond the fan line of artillery. So you've got to go out, sneak and peek, sit in the bushes for long periods of time, and watch the enemy, report back, use a variety of comms to get back to command, take pictures, do whatever you can, but don't get caught is the most important thing. Because you're a very small team, usually 4 to 5 guys. Yes, you've got lots of weapons on you, but a infantry battalion has a lot more weapons. So the goal here is not to get caught. So I went through an indoctrination process, where you have to go through the assessment selection process, which was pretty grueling. Well, I won't say it's fun. It sucked. And then I went to Amphib Recon School in Little Creek, Virginia, actually Fort Story, Virginia, which also sucked. It was 13 weeks, and it was terrible. It was cold, and I was tired a lot. And I was wet all the time. Actually, I had to go through it twice, because the first time, 2/3 of the way through, I developed pneumonia and got recycled. So that's even worse when you know what's coming the second time around. So I passed that school, went to U.S. Army Airborne School, jumped out of planes. It was a 3-week school that could have been done in 3 days. You're basically
Great songs, though.
Oh, great songs. They run real slow. That's the problem. I don't know if you found that to be a problem. Too slow. And then I deployed with the 2-4-MU to Kosovo. Spent a lovely month in the Balkans, month and a half in the Balkans, where I learned that every neighbor hates the other neighbor, and they're all actively trying to kill each other. So it was a great, as I told Pete earlier, it was a great America appreciation moment for me to realize that there are a lot of people out there that really don't like the other people they live with. And you don't get that here in the U.S. So but other than that, it was a great float. It was the last good float. A float is the 6-month deployment because I got out right before 9/11. So it was an interesting experience. Tour Europe, courtesy of Uncle Sam. Got to spend 3 weeks in the south of France. My fiance flew over, took leave in the middle of float, and spent 2 weeks in the south of France. You can't beat that, with a stick. So I got out. I went back to school, finished undergrad, got my MBA at Ohio State, and promptly jumped back into government contracting. So now I'm a government contractor, helping companies do business with the government, but some of the companies I've worked with have done a lot of interesting things, and we can talk about that probably.
Interesting is an interesting word.
Yeah, interesting things is a broad word. So so here I am. I'm currently an independent contractor, working with different companies, helping them access the government market, using the experiences and networks I've developed over the past 20 years now. So I tell me about it. So and I would just like to caveat this. Excuse me if I swear. Especially when talking about military stuff, it just gets interlaced, and I apologize in advance. I know a good Hawken student should be talking like that, but when I got back from boot camp and I met my grandparents right around the corner here on Clubside, I was telling my grandfather and grandmother about boot camp, and everything was good. And I didn't realize that I had said the F word about a dozen times in the first 2 minutes, and they were just kind of looking at me like, you're not the person that left. So anyway, one caveat, but there you go.
Tim O'Brien, in Things They Carried, said, if you don't want your boys to talk dirty, don't send them off to war. Ladies and gentlemen, Brent Miller.
Great. So I have authorization to cuss. So
Absolutely.
Break and brush.
It is. It's autonomic. When you're in the military, it's happening, unfortunately. But I'll try and keep it at bay a little bit. So Brenton Lincoln, like Alex, I too am an alumnus here at Hawken, 94 grad. I was a lifer here with one Jake Scott, who is Peter's oldest and a dear friend of mine. So I share that with Peter as well as the same experience that other Hawken students have, being able to study under here. After school here, I went off to college out in Colorado, and actually graduated in '97, a little bit early. And after graduation, I was looking, of course, as many people do, for what was next in my life. And for several reasons, military service percolated at the top. And perhaps we'll get into the reasons later. Perhaps I should cover them now. I don't know, but
It's up to you.
the Reader's Digest version of it really is kind of trifold, I would say. The first was my father, our father. I've got a couple brothers in the audience here, instilled in us, in me, at a very early age, love of country and patriotism and giving back. And so I felt it important to serve in some capacity. And the military certainly seemed like a way that I might be able to contribute. Secondly, I was 22 at the time and interested in being physically active, being outdoors. I had wanderlust. I wanted to see the world. And I wanted to identify the hardest thing I could possibly identify and go and master it. And then the third thing, which is a personal thing, was I'm the son to an entrepreneur and a very successful one, a grandson to another entrepreneur and a very successful one in his own right, and of course a great-grandson to another entrepreneur who was successful in his own right. I live a very privileged life. I always have, primarily because my family loves me unconditionally, but there are also financial resources that have made my life very, very comfortable. Thank you is a good way to put it. And I don't say that to be braggadocious. That's not my intent at all. But I had a feeling when I was that age that I wanted to identify something that I could go and do, and any and all success or accolade that I ever earned was mine and mine alone, and not because my last name was Lincoln, or because I was related to, or because I knew this person. And I absolutely found that in the military. So for those three reasons, it made sense for me to go and join the military. And so after some soul searching, I made a decision that I wanted to. And again, I wanted to identify the hardest thing that was out there. And of course, Navy SEAL percolated at the top. And I was on that road for some time. I contacted recruiters and had taken some tests that you need to take, physical and cognitive, to enter the United States Navy and become a SEAL. And then it just so happened that the one brother that I have that's not in the audience handed me a book called The Perfect Storm, Sebastian Junger's book about a attempted rescue out in the Northern Atlantic of a fishing vessel that had essentially gone maroon out in a hurricane. At any rate, long story short is that it was pararescuemen in that book that went out to attempt that rescue, and several individuals, to include several pararescuemen, were lost. It piqued my interest in pararescue, and call it just coincidence or serendipity. It was at the exact same time that 60 Minutes and Dateline and 2020 and every news channel was running episodes on pararescue and how difficult it was, and there was an arduous pipeline and the most selective element in the United States military. If that's true, we can certainly debate that. But I won't choose a favorite child or which one's the most difficult. But suffice to say, pararescue is difficult. I identified it. I went to a recruiting office. I joined up. Went to officer training school, so I was an officer straight from the beginning of my service, and then essentially off to pararescue training. That was in 98, 99. The pipeline is 2+ years, so I kicked out right around 9/11. It was busy times thereafter. In total, I did 9 combat deployments, full combat deployments. I did 3 short tours, less than 4 months. And then I did several other excursions to different areas in the world. So my deployments, of course, as you would expect, post 9/11 in Afghanistan, a handful of them. Then Iraq, another handful of them. And then towards the latter portion of my service time, I found myself in the Horn of Africa, trying to tamp out several things that were happening specifically in Somalia. And I would assume we're going to talk a little bit about that. But there are extremist factions in Somalia that were unfettered for some time, and we need to address those. And then, of course, as most of you probably remember, there was a spike in piracy in the northern Indian Ocean, and we had to go and address that. So that's what my team and I were privileged to go do. Altogether, served for 13 plus years, so from 98, 99 to 2011. And in October of 2011, I was officially out of the military, and I was very fortunate to marry a girl also from Cleveland, Ohio. So with our family, we moved back here, and we're happy to be back in Cleveland. And amongst family, we have 3 children of our own, and I'm a surprise, I'm an entrepreneur as well now. So I work with 2 of my 3 brothers, and we make furniture out of reclaimed material. A company called Rust Belt Reclamation. Actually, this stuff is ours. So it's a shameless plug for
Show us my dining room table.
So that's the path that I've marched. A lot of interesting experiences within, and we'll touch on that.
Yeah, we will. I hope so. I don't mind saying this. I'm so proud of these guys. I'm their teacher. I was their teacher, not anymore. But anyway, my story. I took a commission in the Army in the infantry out of ROTC in 1967. 5 days later, reported to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they didn't run that slow for jump school. Maybe these guys. Yeah. Anyway, I had a hard time with jump school because I was fat and full of beer from 4 years at St. Lawrence. I'm not kidding you. I was sucking for air in that place. And I mentioned jump school to Jake. I said, Jake, can you go to jump school and get your blood wings? He said, Dad, fat girls go to jump school. Okay.
I think we're going to touch on that later.
Yeah, okay, we will. But anyway, so I took this commission. I went to Fort Bragg. They sent me right to airborne schools, to jump school, to learn how to jump out of perfectly good airplanes. And then I went to Ranger School at Fort Benning and in Florida and in Dahlonega, Georgia. And it was hard for me. It really was. It really was. But my best friend one of my best friends from college was my Ranger buddy. And when you're a Ranger buddy, you're at the hip. So Mike was attacking on the football team, and I was still a little bit of a fatty by then. Mike got us through it physically, and I got us through it with a shitty attitude. From there, we all knew we were going to Vietnam. It was a given. We were infantry officers. You're going. I came down on orders to go to the Vietnamese, to be an advisor to the Vietnamese Rangers, the Viet Cong Cong, who were supposed to be, and I still think they were, the best South Vietnamese soldiers around. So I didn't feel too bad about that. I thought it was pretty cool. Because I accepted that assignment, they sent me to language school for 6 weeks at Fort Bragg, and I learned how to identify body parts in Vietnamese. And then I got sent to Vietnam. Is that right? Yes. And I went to Vietnam and to be an advisor to the Rangers. And in Saigon, this dude in civilian clothes pulled me out of the barracks. It's a sort of barracks you go to. What do you call them? Assignment for placement barracks, and asked me if I wanted to join a thing called the Phoenix program, which the CIA had just started. He made it sound really sexy. You won't be in uniform, he said, which I thought, that'd be shitty if I got caught.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, really. But he made it sound really sexy. But the most attractive part about the whole thing for me was that I'd be in a small village and live on the economy in Vietnam. So I ended up, the Phoenix program, briefly, the Reader's Digest version. The Phoenix program was established after you were there, by the CIA to root out and find the Viet Cong, the communist infrastructure, clandestine infrastructure in the villages. Everybody in the villages had 2 ID cards. That's a figure of speech. They had an ID card saying that they were a friendly farmer, and at night they were not very friendly. So it was our job. I had a team of 11 former communists who came over to our side for guns and money. And our job was to find these Viet Cong infrastructure dudes and eliminate them, neutralize them. That's what the CIA said. Then the CIA turned the program over to the Army, and it got a little bit different, but it stayed much the same. So my experience in Vietnam, and I wrote a book about it. The Naval Institute Press published it, and it's really cheap on Kindle if you're interested. About my team. My team was executed after we lost. But there are a couple of guys I served with who I still see, and Holly and I still see. We go to these are Khmer Krom, they're called. They're Cambodians, lowland Cambodians, and they fought for us and paid the price. So we still see them. But anyway, and then I came back to the States, and I was 4 years, 3 years active, 3.5 years reserve. And then I got out in 73, 74, and stumbled around for a couple of years. And then I thought, boy, I'd like to be a teacher. So I got a master's degree, and here I am. Yeah. I hope I got all of it there. So here's the drill. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, like I said, so we don't get confusion. The question can be to any of us, or all of us, or one of us. But I hope you have questions or comments. It could be comments. But now it's your turn. Yes, Stacy.
Burning question. If you are not drafted, and if you don't need to be in the armed forces for monetary reasons, and you know there's a possibility of death, what motivates you to go into the armed forces?
Gentlemen.
I was 21 years old. I wasn't doing much at the time, honestly. And, beat working in a lumber yard in downtown Cleveland in the winter of 94, 5 was very cold, very motivating to get out of the lumber yard. Didn't have to work there, but a friend of mine, his dad, got me a job there because I dropped out of college. I had lived out west in Utah and worked out in Utah, and seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, I had a long tradition of family military service. 2 of my 3 uncles and my father all served in Vietnam. My grandfather was and his brother were in World War II, and back. So that had been a part of the family kind of dynamic. I looked at the Naval Academy, actually applied in the Naval Academy, didn't know where I was going to college after I graduated from Hawken, because it had taken them so long. I was going for a medical waiver because of these, and back in the early 90s, only 1/3 of the incoming class could wear glasses. And if you're competing against people like Jake Scott, from a grade standpoint, it makes life a little bit difficult for guys that were a gentleman's B+ here at Hawken. Who
You're welcome.
Yeah, who wear glasses. So I had always been interested in it. This is a long roundabout way of saying I'd always been interested in the military. I've been fascinated by it, and it's getting in the psychology of a young 20-something-year-old man that is trying to figure things out and looking for challenges, and I guess I've read studies that the human male brain isn't fully formed about age 25. And the frontal cortex isn't all there yet.
That's incredibly generous.
Probably 30 in some cases, maybe, I don't know. So I think but seriously, that's part of it. That doesn't factor in. For me, it didn't factor in. I was never worried about killing myself. Lord knows I'd done other things that get me close to that. So that wasn't an issue. The adventure, the interest in challenging yourself. I think for me, that was the big thing.
Doesn't hurt to mention that Alex is one of the best OL leaders I ever had.
Well, yeah, and start with guys like this.
There are others in the room that figure like that.
Well, I already shared briefly my reasons for entering the military. I would say really an extension of what Alex has said, that in the psyche of an 18, 19, 20-year-old, male or female, but certainly I want to speak from a male perspective, you're invincible at that stage in your life, and death is, it's certainly not at the forefront of your mind. It can't happen to you. Any and all thought about that, if there ever is one, is trumped by by mine, let me speak from my own experience, by your desire to engage, right? Engage in whatever way you're engaging. And so it wasn't a consideration per se. It's funny, I think about it through the course of my career, and then of course in retrospect now. And as I matured, certainly I would reflect more and more on the what ifs and the possibilities. I was fortunate to get married, and then of course have children, and that changes the optic, which is an extension of your question. So I don't mean to divert, but there absolutely for me was an evolution in cogitation about potential fatality, and it becomes a very real thing when you're exposed to combat and you see death. When you take life and see life taken, and when friends unfortunately perish, it becomes very tangible very quickly. And so it was something that was thought about, but not acutely, never acutely, even later in the stage. I'm going to lateral this very intentionally because I've always been curious about your experience. Understand, Alex and I went in, joined the military in non-wartime, and post 9/11, there was never a draft. So even today, and through all that we've been through in the last 15 years, it's been a voluntary force. It wasn't in your day, and yet you raised your hand and voluntarily went and did that. So I had the same question for you.
And that's great. Everything you both said informed me and propelled me, you might say. The family thing, Jacob, who you guys have mentioned, is Jacob Gardenier Scott, named for Jacob Gardenier, who lost an ear at the Battle of Oriskany, chopped off by a pissed off Seneca. Way back. We go all the way back in military history. And so it's a family thing, I'm sure, Jake. But for the same reasons, I wanted to be an Indian fighter. You said that's true.
Yeah.
I just admitted that in front of 50 people. And the camp. Oh, Jesus. No, and I wanted to, I wanted to challenge. I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to play with the big boys. And you get that far along, and these guys will admit it, you get the best toys. Absolutely. That kind of thing. But that's sarcastic, but I mean it. And like B said, and Lenny and I were talking about earlier, I mean, I lost my Ranger buddy. He's my son's namesake. And the losses are horrible. And they stay with you. They never, ever leave.
Has that informed your view of war in the military and for instance, your son saying, please don't go into
certainly has informed my, and I'm sure our opinions. But my my sense of duty and my sense of honor and my sense of country haven't changed in the least bit.
You were in Iraq,
Was.
and looking at Iraq now and looking at, have you formed any conclusions in terms of the United States presence there and the mission there and the objectives and the consequences, and
Sure.
how does that color your view of your involvement?
Yeah. I've thought long and hard about that. My wife can attest to that. Because you're proud. That's why I keep pointing over this way. But I'll tell you that either consciously or subconsciously, and again, I want to hear both Peter and Alex's opinion on this one. I would separate politics from my service. I think it's a necessity in order for an individual to serve in the manner that they need to serve. And so any misgivings, if there were any, about what we were doing, how we were doing it, were shelved for the sake of, survival, but for serving in the manner that I wanted to serve, which was with honor and with grace. And for, quite frankly, those who I was serving with. Your question, I think, is more in retrospect, which is a good one. What did we accomplish from going in and de-seating Saddam in Iraq?
We don't need to.
We could fill the entire session with that alone.
But I'm just curious if, I've got a nephew, a Green Beret, and he was a 9/11 kid, and his whole goal was military. And his mom said, finish college first, and he did. And he was in Baghdad, and he's home now. He's got 2 little babies, and and being special forces, I think he's going to be looking down the barrel of ISIS, And I just wonder. I understand the necessity for compartmentalization. Son right now, and I understand the honor. I think, but knowing what you know about war and sometimes getting it wrong, the country getting it wrong, like perhaps we did in Vietnam. Would you give any advice to a child of yours? That was a 18 girl or boy.
Don't forget we're raising hands, okay?
Yeah.
So, my short answer to kind of the first part of your question, because as a contractor, I've got a unique perspective on this. I get to see a lot of these things from non-uniformed perspective. So it introduces profit and revenue and cost into the equation, which is an interesting one, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, when you're in uniform, you're serving, you raise your hand, you get called, you go. No one, excuse my French, no one gives a fuck about.
It's not French. It's
Everybody knows that. No one cares. At the end of the day, your politics.
Yeah.
And when you're there, it doesn't matter. It doesn't inform your decisions on a daily basis on how you plan your patrols.
No, I mean now that you're out.
Oh, now that I'm out.
Now, that's my question. I apologize, I wasn't clear.
Well,
I mean, now that you've lived through it, and you've lived as a military person, and now you've lived as a civilian, and you can look at the political picture.
Oh, I think, and I'm not going to get into the politics, but I think the politics, we've lost something in this country in the sense of politicians serving in some form or having served or having that firsthand experience. It's remarkable, actually. And I'm glad to see that there are some Iraq and Afghanistan veterans that have come back, getting involved in politics. To me, that's going to be the only saving grace of Congress and of our overall political system. Because right now, most of us in this room, and most of the people in the Hawken community don't feel the impact of our actions overseas. They simply don't. Most people don't have a nephew in special forces. Most people don't have that. And
nephew has been drafted.
And, or a nephew that's been drafted, or a nephew that has the potential of being drafted. And so that really, you get the pat on the back in the airport. I'm sure lots of people came out and said, "Hey, you didn't." He did. But they think, "Hey, I've done something for arms." No. Hey, how about stop sending the armed forces to I don't know if the war was thought out or not, but I do know that the outcomes were unclear at the outset. And the mechanisms to getting to those outcomes, whatever perceived outcomes there were not clear. So I think that would be the benefit in my mind of the politics of it, is understand what we're doing.
When you're engaged on the ground, you're not interested in politics. No, I mean, really, it's your brothers, and now your brothers and sisters. I'm happy to say, but it really doesn't. The politics didn't matter. The guys we were fighting in Vietnam weren't communists. They didn't know what communism meant. They really didn't.
They didn't read their Hegel.
They didn't read Marx. They had no idea. They were fighting because they had to. Yes, Jane.
So I have two questions. There's a difference between being frightened and being scared. How many times were all of you scared? And then a non sequitur, several years ago, there were many reports and stories about many soldiers who had come home and were committing suicide.
Still
You
going on.
guys seem to have landed and are balanced. How does that happen with that?
I'll take the first one. I don't think there's any difference between frightened and scared. It's called the pucker factor. If the pucker factor is really high, it takes a sledgehammer to drive a needle up your asshole. Okay? Yeah. That's the pucker factor. Yeah, well, that's kind of graphic, I know, but hey, you're talking to soldiers. And what was the second one?
So the second one is
Oh, the suicide thing. I don't know, man.
Well, I recall being scared only twice on the battlefield. And to be literal about it, I wasn't in the battlefield. I was in an aircraft both times. One was in a helicopter, and there was a complex rocket attack on our two-ship convoy, and I thought I was going to die. I was convinced that I either was going to die or I was going to watch our sister ship get shot out of the sky, and 16 friends were going to perish with it. I distinctly remember being scared in that moment. The other moment was I was in C-130, which is a prop cargo aircraft. When you're inside of it, you're cramped, you're hot, you're pissed off, you're unhappy, you're dirty. So it's just not pleasant conditions to start with. And we were on short final into a small airfield in northern Afghanistan, and all of a sudden the pilots started doing things that shouldn't be done in that type of aircraft, and they started throwing chaff out the sides of the aircraft, which is essentially Teflon that is supposed to attract what's the inbound rounds or rockets. And we came out of it, and then we went right back into it. And I didn't know, I mean, we all knew what was happening, but we didn't know how close it was. Those of us in the back didn't know how close it was until we were on the ground and talked to the air crew. That said, in the moment, I remember being scared because there was no control. There was nothing we could do. We were, those of us in the back, and quite frankly, the pilots in my mind are certifiable heroes. We made it through it, fortunately, but I do remember being scared. Other than that, in the mix, in the thick, never ever scared. So I equated a little bit to sports where you're in the moment and you just do. If you play piano, you're just playing the piano.
It's not anticipation.
It's not conscious, yeah. So there was no other moment other than those two that I was tangibly scared. Now, I will tell you, though, and frightened, scared, what have you, constantly, even to this day, post facto, I always think and cogitate on the experiences that I had. And while deployed, you come back after a mission and, you do post-mission activities, which, are obligatory and some that are, elective, so on and so forth. But ultimately, you're going to find yourself back in your bed, what we call our pooch. And you get a solitary moment to yourself where you say, well, I found myself saying almost on a conscious basis, wow, we made it through that. Or I made it through that, but he didn't. And so I don't know if that's being scared, but it's a little bit like being in a car accident and not really thinking about it. Of course, your adrenaline spikes. But then when you go home at night, you say, wow, that was really close. Or wow, that was really bad.
Or you get sick.
Or you get sick, which has absolutely happened. So that's the best answer I can give on that. The reality of PTSD and people taking their lives post-service is a tragic one indeed. We as a country have not been great at supporting our veterans. Those in particular, who've been exposed to traumatic incidents. If you're involved in combat, you have some level of PTSD. That's my opinion. But you cannot go through such an unnatural human act and walk away unscarred or unchanged. And so there are varying degrees of it, of course. And how that manifests in different individuals is a matter of, one, their experiences, but also their predisposition and their ability to handle that. Special operations, which all three of us were a part of, put members through very arduous training in order to only select those that have a high likelihood of being able to deal with those situations well. But that's not to say they always get it right through the training. And I just hate seeing it. I hate seeing guys and gals taking their lives for the experiences that they've had in the military. Their depression is not preventable per se. At times we need to go to war, and those experiences are going to be had, and certainly it's going to have negative effects. So it's not a prevention thing, but we can certainly do a whole lot better in supporting them once they.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. Rick?
Kind of following up on that, is the VA doing its job? If it's not doing its job, what do you guys think they need to be doing? And as a corollary, projects like Wounded Warrior, every time I support one of my friends doing a race, you wonder why is this necessary? Is this stuff not being provided by the VA? So are these various veterans groups out there that are soliciting, are they valid and real and needed, or should those services be covered by the VA? That's a bunch of questions, but are veterans getting what they should?
I can take that pretty quickly because short answer is no. Short answer is the VA is falling down tremendously.
It's overwhelmed.
It's overwhelmed. It's full of a lot of good, well-meaning people that don't really know what they're doing. And this is coming from a guy who's directly interacting with the VA on a contract basis. So I'm working with a company to help them increase access to primary care for veterans, urgent, non-emergent, urgent care, and primary care. There's a contract coming up for that I'm helping this company get. So I spent a lot of time looking at VA issues, also as a veteran, and also having to deal with the Cleveland VA, who's lost my file twice. And I'm not kidding. I have a stack of paperwork this high. I've got, this is not combat wounds. I've got broken back, carrying heavy equipment over long distances, and I've got, I can't even pronounce it, spondylolisthesiosis or something like that. Anyway, so my back's all jacked up. But the VA, it was nice of them to use my file twice. So I've been dealing with that. As far as the PTSD aspect, a member of my team, he was a corporal when he was in my team. When I was a team leader, he was a staff sergeant, and he killed himself in 2009. Staff Sergeant Dane, and he, just It's not like he had seen a ton of combat. He was a reconnaissance Marine. He had seen combat, I'm sure plenty. I know a lot of guys that didn't kill themselves. Who've seen lots of combat, done lots of things. So I can't process why people take their life like that. I think it's a complete tragedy, and I think it is not being addressed in any meaningful way. And I'm at a loss to figure out what gets done about that, because we have lots of guys coming back who it's like this self-reinforcing mechanism, because so few people, less than 1% of the country, signed up for the military, and a very small percentage of that actually go to a combat type situation, whether they're infantry or not, doesn't matter. You've got a very small, engineers, So you've got this very small core of people that are repetitively going over and over and over again, exposing themselves. It's just like, the traumatic brain injury and PTSD are interlaced. These sorts of activities are very athletic-oriented activities. You're going to get injured. I can't tell you how many concussions I had. I had some weird stuff happen. I got hit by lightning. How about that?
Because you're a Marine.
Yeah. So, getting back to being scared, I was scared I was never going to move again because I was paralyzed for 3 hours on the top of a mountain in Southern California. These bad things happen to people in these sorts of jobs because it's very athletic. It's like being a triathlete and, that sort of thing. It's just really wearing on you. And over time, your body is only going to deal with it for so long. And, whether it's head injuries or back injuries or, guys are blown out knees or guys are missing limbs. There's a lot of injuries that come with this job. And I think our system as it exists right now is ill-equipped to handle it.
Scott.
I know a SEAL who was in training, who got through SEAL training. The guy who was training number one in his class, 2/3 of the way through, got to the test where they take you down deep in the water. Mm-hmm. It was in one of the videos, I think, for your type of training. Mm-hmm. They take off your tank. Yep. They basically try to. This guy was an Olympic quality swimmer, running the hell that day. So I'm curious, in your training, what was the moment for each of you where you had that moment that you just had to get through? That was your breaking point. You didn't break it. Those numbers get widowed down so much. It's got to be a very fine line when you break or not break it that key.
I'm going to sound like a complete arrogant asshole here.
It's okay.
I never flinched in training. I never did. I equate that to the fact that I had ample time to prepare for the rigors of the pipeline. I had a good understanding of what I was going to be exposed to, but not a complete one. I had tremendous teammates around me that we were all self-supportive or mutually supportive. There wasn't a moment for me in training where I said, you know what, of all the alternatives I have right here, I might consider ringing the bell. And we do the same thing. So that was Bud's talking about our indoctrination course and the pipeline that follows.
Where is yours?
Blackland Air Force Base, Texas, San Antonio, Texas is where the kick in the soft part of the anatomy is, and that is a BUDS. That is the Pararescue BUDS. And then thereafter, you go to pre-dive school. What you saw is a combat dive school. Combat dive school for us was down in Key West, Florida. We actually go to the Army dive school, and then you go into airborne and free fall and so on and so forth. There was no point where I said, even contemplated, that's what I want to do. Again, I don't want to be boastful, but I was largely the exception. There were, with all in pararescue, you start with a class of 120 and you graduate 5 to 7. And so there were a lot of guys that were physically gifted, but just didn't have the composition mentally to say 2 things, I think. 1, nothing will ever defeat me, ever. And 2, tomorrow's coming, right? What I'm being exposed to now is short term, right? And I can endure this pain for however long they're going to inflict upon me and roll, keep moving. And if you can do those two things and you're ardent about it, you will succeed. And they will get you physically prepared to again, meet the standards. That's my answer to your question. I have, people that I know that were triathletes and really, really good folks that didn't make it through. But it's more up here than it is.
It's all in your head. It's all in your head. Fun fact, like speaking of water, I played water polo in college, which, as it turns out, was great for my training because it's a very water-oriented. PJs do the same thing. Very water-oriented. And so being assaulted in the water, I'm fine with that. I can hold my breath. I can go to the bottom. I actually more comfortable on the water than I am on top. It's just because it's a mindset. But I remember the only time I remember thinking, I'm gonna tap out on this was when I developed pneumonia and I got recycled. I got sent back to my to a temporary barracks. I'm sitting there by myself because I'm dying coughing, just coughing up a lung. I'm like, do I want to do this again? What am I doing here? What's going on? And I was like, well, I don't want to go back to this, so I'll do it again. And that was it. It was like one of those passive decisions, and you just kind of set yourself up to go do it again. That's inertia. So
I have to amend my answer real quick. I did come close once. It was in airborne school. And I say this candidly, I never came close. But in airborne school, it's 3 weeks long. You're down in Fort Benning, Georgia, which is just a miserable place. It's a horrible place. You can
smell the
surface of the sun hot, and 150,000% humidity, whatever, however high it goes. It's 3 weeks: ground week, tower week, jump week, and you essentially stand in line for 3 weeks. That's what you do. And, we're all high speed and we're young. We want to be doing things. And we go off to an army school and we have to stand in line all the time. Like 20 hours a day, we're standing in line. I'm almost tapped out at that point. I was like, man, this is great. Good old army.
The army calls it hurry up and wait.
Sitting here, I turn my head to the right and left, and I see the word fair play both directions. And you came from very substantive family backgrounds, and then you came from a Hawken background, which gave you some version, whatever it means to you, of fair play. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure I can imagine what the benefits of that would be in the experiences you went through, and also wonder if there were times when you either felt conflicted or burdened by what you came out of here with in terms of fair play.
Well, I didn't come out of here, so I'm going to give it to you.
I never felt conflicted about fair play. I mean, it's such a universal. There's no way, in none of my experiences did I ever think that cheating or kind of cutting corners like that, or not dealing with people appropriately was ever going to advance me in any way. It just never would have crossed my mind. So I guess the short answer is no, because I never had it put in front of me that it was that it was an option. That being said, the great thing about, especially being an enlisted guy in the Marine Corps, the diversity of backgrounds, and we're talking true diversity of backgrounds that you experience. You get to see a lot of people, some of which, for better or for worse, didn't have anything close to an experience like this. And you get to see how they react to things. And generally, the human, I'm an optimist when it comes to human nature. I do, because I have gotten to see a lot of different types of people. They generally react in a fair play manner. They may not be able to say what they're doing, but they generally operate that way. And in the soft community, special operations community, you will last all 30 seconds if you are a shithead. And because it's a tight community. I mean, the Marine Reconnaissance community is small. I think it's the smallest. Now we have MARSOC, and that's got a little small, but it's small. And if your name gets attached to some, where you're not acting in the fair play manner, you're done. So
Yeah, I never saw in the Rangers, at least, I never saw selfish behavior.
Nor did I with Pararescue. So I would answer your question. I think it's a good one. Fair play to me is the root of an individual's character. Fair play speaks to character to me. And it served me well all throughout my life. I believe I learned that here and have carried it forward and have tried to, as best I can, stay true to that at all times. I'll take a little different than Alex. I agree in party or in kind. So among special operators, I never saw fair play trammeled on. Right? But I do remember being disappointed as I got a little longer in the tooth and more experiences under me, being disappointed in others when they didn't exhibit the same. And those are hard lessons to learn. And I'm talking U.S. citizens, service members, I'm talking enemy combatants, I'm talking politicians, I'm talking all genres of life. I can't speak universally or even for the individual on my left and right. For me, I came out of Hawken somewhat naive, thinking that there was no exception to that rule, and I had to learn otherwise, which again was a difficult thing to understand or to come to grips with. And my military experience, certainly early in life, helped me along that path. And what it did ultimately, as I look at it in retrospect, is make me appreciate even more what this institution does and the motto that it carries. It's right there on every wall. It's an important thing.
Thank you. Andrea?
I actually have a really great transition question.
That was pre-programmed.
No, but actually,
she's much better looking
someone
than you.
on the computer right now, Jeff Bigger, has been researching our alumni database, and he's found about 375 alumni who are veterans. And the question that he has is, like, what type of message would you give to our young men and women in high school, might be at Hawken, about their service to country as opposed to community?
in opposition to that.
What he said, as opposed to. I think.
I
don't think it's combative.
Distinct.
So in terms of whether serving the military is equivalent to kind of a community service type.
I think so.
I think so.
Well, I think service in some capacity is paramount in that it is beneficial certainly to the nation, to the community, to whatever level you're serving, but also to the individual. So I think it's paramount that we all serve in some form or fashion. Any able-bodied citizen should and has, I believe, a responsibility to serve. The military is just one way to do it. So I don't think that Jeff meant anything other than if we're talking to young people, or again, let me say it from my own perspective. When I'm talking to young people about the military, and this harkens back a little bit to your question about my military experiences, and specifically if they're interested in the military, I absolutely encourage them to explore it as a viable option. I took much more from my military service than I ever gave. And the person that I was when I came out was different and, in my estimation, better than the person that went in 13 years earlier. And I think that the military, far more than any other institution, organization, setting that I know of, does an excellent job at grooming good people, good talent. If the core is there to begin with, the military takes it and expounds it many fold. And so, again, I always encourage young folks to at least explore. I didn't answer your question because I didn't have an opportunity to, but real quickly, just to color that a little bit, I have 2 sons of my own and a daughter, and they're young.
She can go too.
Yeah, she can go too now, right. I will never, ever encourage them or dissuade them towards or away from the military. It is entirely their choice. But if they ask me, I will certainly tell them that I greatly appreciate and am proud of the service that I give. So that would be my answer to this.
That's a good one. Yeah, and I think that it's important, and these guys will support me in this, to point out that the special operations units are different from mainline military units in so many ways. So yeah, and about the VA, Rick, is he still here?
It's
Not
about.
yet. Well, then I'll leave it alone. Who? Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you guys for everything. Secondly, hearing everything you're talking about, the other side of it, I think you guys, the experiences, the things you've seen and done are just incredible. I'm wondering, maybe when you look back, what do you consider like obviously you've experienced the highest of highs and lowest of lows. What are some of the highs? Like when you look back, what is something you remember as a great accomplishment, and or what's the places you've been, the things you've seen? When you look back, what are some of the highs that you consider for your service?
Here's a chance for me to lean on B, because I want him to talk about a rescue mission that he feels good about, and with some details.
I'll do my best.
It's cool.
The highest high, no question about it, and I'm not dodging Peter's recant your question, is the relationships that you forge. No question about it. Perhaps you've heard the term band of brothers. That is a real thing. That absolutely exists when you are amongst a group of individuals who are like-minded, but then are exposed to the challenges that you experience in the military, and then certainly if you're in combat together. The bond that's forged is different than any bond in life. And so as I walked away from my military career, and as I look back on it, that's what I most cherish. The highest of high operationally, actually, ironically, wasn't a rescue mission. In Somalia, there were a bunch of bad actors running around. One of them was named Saleh Nabahan. Saleh Nabahan was the individual responsible for the bombings of embassies both in Ethiopia and Kenya in the 90s. And since then, he had been shooting airliners out of the sky with AK-47s and just generally acting against U.S. national interests. We've been chasing him for a long, long time, and it just so happened to be on my watch that we were able to get him. And by get him, I mean he's no longer with us. Nobody takes exception to that. But that was a high because it took a lot of effort to make that happen and consummate the action. In parallel to that, because I'm a pararescue man, I have to give a nod to Captain Phillips, and so I also happened to be on that, which was pretty sweet. I was in Somalia at the time. Actually, I was in Kenya at the time. I was an officer, so I was responsible for coordinating our actions with the ambassador in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, because at the time, and even still, we don't have a formal embassy in Somalia. So Kenya had jurisdiction over Somalia at the time. And so I would travel to Kenya, talk with the ambassador, and inform him what it is we were doing and what we wanted to do, and seek his authorization. So it was back and forth, and I happened to be in Kenya at the time when the MV Alabama was taken by pirates. And of course, Captain Phillips very adroitly negotiated his crew safety and delivery freedom, if you will, and then he of course was held captive for several days, and just so happened through the course of those days, I was able to get back to my team, fly out and jump into the ocean, and then be on the ship when a force from Virginia Beach, Virginia, SEAL Team 6 came in and jumped on top of us, and then together we liberated Captain Phillips. That was the best rescue mission I have, and it's the most highest profile.
A sucker.
You could, yes, yeah, absolutely. But it's like choosing favorite children. You know, you rescue somebody, it's a pretty special thing. We did a lot more treatment on local nationals than we did on U.S. service members. And I'll sit. I think it's clear without saying that certainly working in the U.S. sit in a soldier, sailor, airman, marine is something that certainly stays with you longer than the local nationals. But when you're dealing with human life, it's they're all dire, I guess.
And my local nationals, my team, were all former communists, and we had to trust one another when we went into the field. And I had to trust them, and our language was barely sufficient. But it was brotherhood. Finally, language or not, I mean, they called me Big Nose and Round Eye. And, when we walked at night, to go on an ambush, there'd be these 11 little guys in this big white tombstone outlined, and stuff
Fat
like
white dude, apparently.
Not anymore. No, but anyway, it's been said by both of these guys, and I'll say it again because it bears saying, there's no greater love. I mean, other than my family, there's no greater love. Some of you met Bro when he was here in the spring, and you'll meet him again. There's no greater love than he will lay down his life for his brother.
With that in mind, do you two gentlemen consider Peter your teacher or your comrade in arms?
That's a great question. Comrade, no question about it. So there's several folds that I'm related to Peter. Talk about Jacob, of course. He's a teacher, but once I made the decision to join, maybe Alex shares this, he became a comrade, and then we have a shared experience in combat. It was interesting that, just a personal anecdote, before the centennial last spring, there was, of course, a program set where alumni were to come back and share with students some of their experiences. And I was to talk with Peter, to some of the students, about our military experiences. And of course, tragically, that didn't happen because of a car accident that took two young men's lives. We all know that story. So that event didn't happen. But before that terrible incident, Peter gave me a call and said, "Hey, let's pregame this. Let's meet." And so we did at in Sugar Falls. What's the name of the restaurant?
The Little
Rivers or whatever. Yeah, whatever. The one friend out from Dayton. It's inconsequential. But I brought my wife with me, Kate, and Peter and I embraced. And instantaneously, there is a connection, a bond with an individual who has experienced those same things. So I'm happy to consider Peter not only a mentor and somewhat of a father figure, but also as a brethren, as an individual that understands the things that I have experienced, which is unique. Because I don't know if there's anybody else in this room that has been in combat, but if you are, then I believe what I'm saying resonates with you, because it's an interesting experience.
What's the expression? Until you've had the elephant sitting on your chest.
Has it been in a combat? I mean, I've heard
Absolutely.
that military guys just say the adrenaline, the bonding, the love,
Absolutely.
and then thereafter, life is not that exciting.
Re-entry.
And that's an overstatement and a misstatement.
Re-entry is difficult. That was for me,
Yeah.
at least. And you guys, if you got to get up and go. What time is it?
Then we get quarter till.
Oh, quarter till
Want to do a couple more questions?
Quarter till 8.
8. Oh, okay. If you want to get up and eat something or drink something,
Okay, so this brotherhood that you're talking about, is this part of the experience that's sustaining ISIS? These kids who are in ISIS?
Sure.
Yeah, they're lost.
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
So how do you break that?
kill them.
Yeah, basically, it's immediate, short term. Stop the flow. That's a challenge that we are ill suited to address as a country, and
I agree totally.
Well, the reality absolutely exists amongst our adversaries. Again, it's human nature to bond those that you're experience adversarial and difficult experiences with. So I'm not so sure that addressing that is the key to our ability to address the ISIS issue or fundamentalist issues at large. But I think we're better informed, understanding that they too consider themselves as a bad approach. It can work to our disadvantage, and it certainly can work to our advantage as well. The hardest times, Peter will say this, I believe, was when I lost a friend or friends. So, everyone has emotion and is a human being. That was something that, again, completely off script, I apologize. That was something that I had to come to terms with. I think, again, my experience is that you kind of dehumanize your enemy in combat situations. You kind of have to in order to take the actions that you need to take in order for self-preservation and for advancing the mission, so on and so forth. The reality is that on the other end of the barrel is a human being. The families. They're a son to someone or a daughter to someone. They're a brother or a sister to someone. They're a best friend to someone else, and they're, living, breathing, conscious human beings. And that is a crazy thing to think about, that we are capable of such inhuman, unnatural acts against other human beings. And so it gives me great pause to think about that. But at the same time, again, you're there to do a job. I don't mean to make it callous, but you're there for your brethren, and in combat, it's combat. Rounds are going both ways, so better to be accurate and fast.
So here's a guy, a woman, and they're doing a job, and then they come back to the United States and they get court-martialed for having killed the wrong person, or for an imam, was hanging out the window. And there's this book, Yellow Birds. It's a novel, but it's reflective of a couple years ago when they had the scapegoat came back and charges were pressed against soldier, and he was court-martialed for shooting the wrong people.
So I would address that as.
Do you remember this? Agreeing on this?
That's a part of
It happened in Vietnam.
Well, I mean, the Marines, right? So there was a line coming in. Marines that got in trouble because they took pictures of themselves, videos of themselves urinating on the dead that they just killed, the Taliban. Now, a lot of people don't realize or know that those guys had just killed three of their platoon mates, and this was absolutely very tail end of the heat battle, and these guys were pissed off. Now, does it make it right? No, this is not. This is what an American military person does. Absolutely not. It's the laws of combat. Make that very clear. Does it exonerate them? No, but it happens, and that's because it's a human. It's human beings trying to express a human emotion in some way. As far as killing the wrong person on the battlefield. The interesting thing, and it really started in Vietnam, the extension of the battlefield to civilian areas. And this, I mean, you could talk this back a ways. Mother Courage and her children, right? How the battlefield has changed over time. There are no longer front lines. There are lines, and there are people fighting all over the world. As much as I hated the term global war and terror, in the global aspect of what we're fighting right now is very, very true. So American soldier, in a general term, is extremely well trained, is extremely knowledgeable about their craft. But when taken off of the battlefield and put in a situation where it might not look like a battlefield, but it is a battlefield, you sometimes end up killing people or calling in fire on a hospital in Afghanistan. Sometimes because there are a whole bunch of Taliban inside, and there's no Red Cross or Red Crescent on the roof like there should have been. It's the fog of war, all of that. It's a very complex environment nowadays, and as horrible as those things are, and they are horrible. I mean, innocents being killed unintentionally. And I don't even get into intentionality because that's a whole different thing. But unintentionally killing innocent people is a horrible thing. I can't imagine doing that. And how you have to live your life knowing that happened.
I've thought on that. It's a little bit of an extension of your question. I would tell you that, and I'm not passing judgment on this. Quite frankly, I think it's correct, but it needs to be understood. That first and foremost, combat is hell. Right? It's hell.
Chaos.
It's chaos, and hopefully you control the chaos better than your adversary, and generally that will make you victorious. But we, the United States and the Western world, limit our abilities to wage combat, particularly commensurate to the manner in which our adversaries in an asymmetric environment are waging war, because of our ROIs, rules of engagement, because of our morality. And so there's a full spectrum of this, but let me just give you an example. In Iraq, we were assaulting compounds to go get high-value targets. And the first thing that we would do is shoot every dog on premises dead. They bark. So that alerts our enemy that we're there. And the easiest way to
smell your old spiced deodorant.
Yeah, that's right. We've showered in the last, month, so we smell different than most things there, and so they bark. And so to muzzle them, we would take their life. And I love dogs, but I had no reservation about shooting one in Iraq because it directly saved lives, no question about it. A directive came down because the local nationals, ostensibly civilians, were complaining that their pets were being killed. And so we inflicted on ourselves, or imposed upon ourselves, a limitation of taking animals' lives. And I know in several instances that cost American service members' lives. No question about it. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't want to venture into that. We can have a conversation about that. But we strap ourselves because of our morality. Again, I believe that's correct. Sometimes I think we overextend ourselves in the event of the dog, certainly. But to Alex's point, oftentimes in the confusion, in the chaos, mistakes are going to or can happen. And we certainly shouldn't be crucifying the men and women we send into those situations if it's unjust to do so. And sometimes you have
Well, and to that point, there's, especially in the special operations community, there's a bias towards action. So you're taught from the beginning, don't just stand there, go do something, make something happen, because you can always correct. Even if you make the wrong decision, no, it's a positive decision because you know it's wrong, because you got some feedback that's the wrong decision. Fair understanding. So a lot of these incidents occur because there's that bias towards action, bias towards solving the problem, bias towards getting somebody out or attacking, returning fire to a location from where you're receiving it. You're not going to sit there and always check on the map, make sure it's in the fire zone. So yes.
One more question. Yes, sir.
Did any of you ever consider making a military career?
I did. I took a regular Army commission out of ROTC, which meant it's my ID card. It said expiration date in def. But it didn't work for me. I mean, it's a long story. It wasn't because of Vietnam. It was a lot of other different things. Well, perhaps that's not right. Our reception coming home from Vietnam was I can't be in an airport when people started applauding troops getting off the airplane. I just sobbed. And that's not why I got out, but there was a reduction in force at the time. And so infantry officers, they were glad to see us go. Actually, they were glad. At least that's what they said. So, yeah, I did. You were in. You were
close enough.
You were
just for the record, thank goodness you got out. We all been. So, like my entry into the military, my exit was a confluence of different things. I absolutely considered making it a career. But Kate and I were starting a family. I sustained a couple minor injuries, if you will, that were starting to limit my ability to do what it is I wanted to do. And family was back here in Cleveland, Ohio. And I had an ill father-in-law that we wanted to be with. And of course, my mother-in-law was also here. We wanted to be with her. And I will tell you, it was interesting. We came back in 2011, and it wasn't for 2 years, just short of 2 years, that my father-in-law passed away. And in that time, I was not regretful, but thought maybe, maybe I could have kept going, maybe I could have stayed in. But his passing crystallized for me that we did absolutely the right thing. I prioritize family first, period, always have. And that flushed away any sort of reservation that I had about missing what I had when I was in the military. So it was absolutely the right decision. And I served for 13 plus years, and everybody looks at me and says, "You got out of 13 and a half years," which is crazy. Most people don't, but I did, and it was absolutely the right thing for me.
Short answer for me is no. I would have kept on doing it. Career, I think, or that the sense of a career implies some sort of plan or goal. I enjoyed doing I had a great job. I loved it. I got paid to do a lot of fun stuff. I got paid to do what I now pay to do in terms of going to shooting ranges and diving and stuff like that. So I would absolutely would have loved to continue doing it. Again, family, I was engaged. There was nothing going on at the time. It sounds weird to say it, but there was nothing going on. It's like, and this is, I recognize this is flippant, but it's like practicing a sport that you're never going to play the game.
It's not flippant.
That's not flippant.
And it's, for me, that was the we took our jobs very seriously. We took it deathly seriously, but there was nothing. I got out in 2000. There was nothing going on. Kosovo was the big high watermark in my career. And I saw all the unpleasantry of it. I just never got shot at while I was doing it. So no, and Garrison Marine Corps. I don't know. I'm not even talking about the Air Force, but the Garrison Marine Corps is not a good life. It's just not. it's not a lot of fun. There's especially for an enlisted guy, it's just not fun. So
Okay, Tim. Thanks,
Dan,
folks.
Dan had one question.
Dan,
Raising his hand dutifully.
I did have a couple questions for you guys, but at this point, I'm Dan Epstein, 77, also a 4th PSYOP group, mid-80s, work rag. I'd like to talk to you guys later because my questions are just going to go all over the place. But I was really curious for all of you, frankly. I heard that this is one of the most popular First Thursdays in the series, and I'd like to know why. I'd like to know, just for a couple of you, like based on your questions, it's pretty interesting. But what was it about hearing about special operations people that drew you? What was your curiosity?
Birdie.
I can't imagine doing what you did. It's larger than life. Yeah, it's kind of just, I admire you more than.
I read your.
I'll take that.
I read your book, The Lost Comet. I want to know about the student talking school.
Good for you. Good for you.
Well, I want to know, did he get to finish at Hawken?
Yes, he finished at Hawken, then he finished at Muskingum, and then he went on to be an officer in the Army Reserve, an artillery officer. He's now head of security in Concourse C at the airport. He's got two boys, and in March, he survived the killing fields. In March, he's going to do this with us and talk about the killing fields in Cambodian killing fields and what it was like.
I wrestled with such a.
You wrestled.
Yeah, he was a strong, fast.
Yeah,
A strong, fast wrestler.
Yeah. Thanks, folks.
Great.
Good.